Okay, so without further ado, welcome everybody to the Engagement Network. My name's Celine Elliott and I'm the Engagement Lead for Cornwall Museum Partnership, or CMP, as we like to be known. It's a bit catchier. For those of you who haven't been here before, who haven't joined us, the Engagement Network has been running for a number of years. We're supported by Arts Council England in this. And our main objective, as I was saying, is to share learning, to create connections, and to propagate best practice in Cornwall, because we know so much is happening. So today we're going to be talking and hearing about memory and museums. And of course, there's lots of brilliant work that's been happening for a long time with museums and galleries around this topic. But over the last 12 months, we've had a couple of examples which we thought would be worth shining a light on and sharing a little bit about. And that's not to say that there's not lots of other things happening. What we'll do, the structure of the day is, we'll have a couple of presentations. We're going to hear from Memory Matters and Royal Cornwall Museum. And then we're going to sort of segue into a session around Weybridge Memory Cafe in the National Gallery. And what we'll do is, if you've got any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and I'll make sure they get asked at the end of each session, each segment. But we'll also leave plenty of time at the end. And we've already heard a little bit from Angela and Museum of Cornish Life. We know they've done some brilliant work. So what we'd like to do is share a bit of that ad hoc at the end. And if anyone else has got any brilliant examples they'd like to bring to light, or any other potential connections we can make, we'll speak a little bit about that towards the end. And so hopefully that'll give us some structure. It should be fairly light, not too PowerPoint heavy. And hopefully everyone feels welcome and free to, there are no stupid questions. So you can ask anything you want, and we'll see how far we can take the topic in the next sort of hour and a half. We may finish early, and then we'll just consider it the gift of time. But I've allowed an hour and a half to make sure we get the most out of the session. So without further ado, I'll allow people to introduce themselves. We're going to start with Dan and Lauren. And if you'd like to go ahead, I will mute myself and we'll look forward to hearing more in a bit.
Thank you, Celine. I'm just going to, one moment, just share my screen with everyone and get the presentation up.
Yeah, we were just going to say hello, first of all. I'm Lauren, I'm the engagement officer at the Royal Cornwall Museum, if I haven't met you already. And Dan is a community connector at Memory Matters. So we were just going to talk a little bit about a kind of pilot project, really, that we've done in the last 2 months. It's been a really fun experience and we've done loads of learning with it. So we thought it'd be great to share. Yeah, you can start us off, Dan.
So I guess the first question is, how did this all come about? How did Memory Matters and Royal Cornwall Museum get together? Me and Lauren attended a Only Connect meeting. It's a bit similar to this, a network that's run by Ellie Robertson-Carter of the Sensory Trust. And there's 55 members of the network, and they meet bi-monthly to discuss creative intergenerational practice and research. And the group also shares creative solutions to disconnection. So this often sparks collaboration across the network. And that's how we came together. So yeah, as Laura mentioned, I work for Memory Matters. We're a dementia organisation that specialise in the delivery of cognitive stimulation therapy, or CST, as you'll hear a lot of that word throughout the presentation. So yeah, my job as a community connector, thanks to my bosses, Kate and Laura, for the jazzy job title, is to make contact and link to other organisations in all things dementia in Cornwall. So I met Lauren, the Royal Cornwall Museum Engagement Officer, at the meeting and shared what we do. And Lauren described how the museum did lots of work with young people, but not much facilitated work for the older generation. So we discussed the collaboration after Lauren heard all about CST. So what is CST? It's an engaging programme of activity sessions designed to improve wellbeing and confidence. It's usually done in 14 session blocks with 2 hours a week. It just covers a range of topics. It uses implicit learning, so there's curiosity and people learn together. and it encourages participation to function, participants, should I say, to function at their maximum capability. Groups usually kept small, no more than 8 people, to enable discussion. And CST has the guidelines in the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. So as you can read here, people with mild to moderate dementia of all types should participate in cognitive stimulation, which should be commissioned and provided by a range of health and social care workers with training and supervision. This should be delivered irrespective of any anti-dementia drug received by the person with dementia, which is the biggest thing for us with what we do, because the improvement in cognition and quality of life is used without any drug. And the best thing about it as well is we get to have fun whilst we're doing it. CST has a number of key principles, which I'll just quickly go through a couple of them. I mentioned earlier about obviously mental stimulation. My favorite one since I've come to Memory Matters is opinions rather than facts. There's no wrong answer, and it's very person-centered what we do.
So as you can probably imagine, there's quite a lot of kind of natural links between museum spaces and CST. And I guess what we wanted to do with this pilot project is explore some of those. So we really love the idea of using CST with our objects and artworks, and using kind of all of our senses to share opinions and discussions and kind of exercise our brains, really. So we hadn't really had many community groups since the pandemic. This is the first one that we worked with in the museum. So we kind of first got everyone, we got Sophie and Dan, we kind of arranged a site visit with them, and they checked over the space, and we worked through a kind of time and a regular slot that would work for them, and for the people with dementia. So that meant finding a solution for a kind of quiet space, somewhere where carers and families could engage outside the group. So that was our cafe next door. And then the room to be available consistently over a period of 8 weeks, to be in the same room at the same time. And it was really good to have, Dan and Sophie and I were really good at, finding that space together and working through where would work in our museum for that. And then we started to create a kind of plan about the sessions and how that would work in the museum. So we mapped out 8 sessions, which we did that really preliminary, I don't know how to say that word, but we kind of did a 4-week block basically, and then we set some time aside to reevaluate and then plan another 4 weeks so that we could be flexible dependent on the interests of the people in the group. So combining CST with museum resources and the skills that both organisations had, that meant the kind of traditional CST methods. We've got a board up here on the left that you can see, and we did a lot of word warm-ups. That was really exciting. And then also from the museum, using memory boxes, group discussions, tours and discussions of our temporary exhibitions. We did a little bit of watercolor painting, close looking, a lot of object handling, so that kind of sensory stuff was really important. Discussions from artworks from our stores, which you can see in the photo here. And then also a really nice one that we did was we used our hopscotch to do some word warm-ups, which was a really nice unexpected part of the sessions. So I feel like it was very experimental, but a lot of things were quite successful, and I feel like we just scratched the surface with combining both museum resources and CST methodologies. So our kind of objectives of the project, when we sat down initially to discuss what we wanted out of this project and where we wanted to go with it, it was actually really quite surprising how, even though we're both very different organisations, a lot of our objectives were really similar in what we were trying to do with our, the people that we work with. So the objectives that we came up with were actually pretty easy to come up with, which was these here in front of you: increasing learning opportunities through partnerships and collaboration, increasing opportunities for people with dementia to shape their own museum experience, increasing the use of museum resources and objects for therapeutic purposes, and improving the lived experience of people with dementia through researched therapy, socialization, and connection with the wider community. Yeah.
So we've spoken a lot about our organisations and what CST is, but I want to introduce you to David. So we have changed his name for the purpose of the presentation, but everything that I tell you about his story for his journey in this short 8 weeks period is completely true. So David, he's a retired, proud businessman. He's a man who's always been in control of his work, his health and his life. And he was diagnosed with dementia recently. And as you can imagine, being told the devastating news, it was quite difficult to take. He can be described as quite a dapper man, always wearing smart jacket and shirt. And he was very polite and curious about most things. He was referred to Memory Matters from the Truro primary care dementia practitioner. Initially, we telephoned his daughter, who told us he'd had a recent stay in hospital, which he was struggling to recover from physically and cognitively. She felt he'd lost his confidence. He was reluctant to mix with other people in sheltered accommodation. He'd not been out into the city much due to COVID. And she was not sure whether her dad would even be happy to stay on his own for the first session. On the first day, he walked from his home, accompanied by his daughter, and he did stay on his own, which was a great start. And he was soon initiating conversations with other group members, asking whether they had similar difficulties to him. He said, "I can remember what I did when I was young, but I can't tell you what I did yesterday." As he left the first session, he said, "I now know I don't have to worry about what I say here. We're all in the same boat." And over the weeks he attended, David initiated some great discussions with the group about his dementia. He wanted to know how others cope with their common difficulties. He told us how he felt embarrassed when speaking to people where he lives because he couldn't remember their names. And on the third session, myself and Laura, one of Memory Matters co-founders, we ran a session all about sport. David actively took part and reminiscent about games at school to bring his memory alive. We all had a go at playing hopscotch, and David was actively taking part. And then the following week, David started the session by saying, "My memory's so bad, I don't remember anything these days." And then he went on to say about hopscotch he had played in the previous session. "Oh no, I do remember that because it was so funny. You've caught me out." And that's the power of CST. By making things fun and engaging, using parts of the brain that can be exercised by these activities, the memory stays and can be recalled. David enjoyed handling the objects during the sessions, particularly the butterflies and bug sessions. He said, "They fascinate me. It's interesting being able to look at them so close up. I've lived in this area for years, but I've never been to the museum. And these artifacts would never be usually available for touching. Obviously, it can be seen in person, but touching and feeling, it awakens so many parts of the brain. So running a CST group in the museum can be so powerful. It also means that the museum becomes a place of wonder, a place that ignites thought, opinion, and interest. It stimulates all of us, but especially those who find it difficult to independently find new things to learn. At the watercolour exhibition, David said, "The detail's amazing. I can't believe how many shades of green there are." And he kept returning during the session for another look at one particular painting. And during the second to last session, he said, "This is the best session so far. Sometimes I've come here and not been sure if it's doing any good, but this one has made me really think." David chatted about how he wasn't sure about the sessions for the first few weeks. "I was a businessman and I like to know what I'm going to get out of this. But as the weeks went by, I enjoyed it more." And his daughter, we had the families come along to the last session, and his daughter said during the last session, "It's brilliant, brilliant. You must find funding for this. Before coming here, Dad had been in hospital and he'd really lost his confidence. I didn't think he would stay on his own. He's loved it. We'll miss coming." She went on to say, "It's just so great that they all have dementia in common. There's nowhere else he goes where he's made to feel like this, and he can really be himself here. And giving this chance to others to wander and improve their memory is obviously an amazing way to engage the community." So we evaluated the project using different methods. This included the UCL's Museum Wellbeing Measures Toolkit, that's a bit of a tongue twister, to create a wellbeing questionnaire. We also evaluated how each beneficiary engaged in the sessions, and we spoke to family members, as I mentioned at the end of the project, to measure how successful it was, not only from a CST standpoint, but also from the museum. I'm just going to show you a couple of things that we did learn during the session. I mean, we plan to evaluate this after fully and send it out to everybody. But some of the key things that we picked out from the evaluation during the little bits that we have looked at is the highest scoring pieces from the wellbeing guide was actually that they felt safe and secure in the museum, and they also felt interested, and we just thought that was great, that was the highest scoring pieces. But as I mentioned, we've got lots more data to share with everyone. We're going to be working on the evaluation, so we'll make a guide available very soon.
We thought we'd kind of pick up on some nice moments that happened throughout the session. So there was one time where there's one beneficiary. We ran a session right at the end, where we asked everyone in the group to bring in a treasured item from home that they could share with everyone. And one beneficiary, she brought along a christening mug, which was a gift from her godfather on her christening day. And she told us this amazing story about how her godfather returned to London to work a day early following the christening, and was sadly killed by German bombs whilst in his office. And at this point, when she, it was just such a moment when she shared this story with all of us, and we were saying afterwards how we felt really kind of entrusted with a really, really sentimental piece of information, and felt like we've built up that trust within the week. And I feel like that within the project, and I feel like that's reflected in the evaluation where everyone felt that they were so safe and secure. And this same beneficiary and her daughter had the opportunity during the session to explore the museum and find something that interested them. And they spent some time looking at the mineral collection, as some of these items were actually donated by one of her uncles. And she said when she went into this gallery, I remember having them all piled up in his house when I was young, and they were such a nuisance. So it was really, in terms of, engaging with that wider community and making those links, it was really interesting for us to kind of add those layers of stories to our collection, as well as quite a mutual exchange.
Yeah, another beneficiary appeared to enjoy the painting exhibition. He was particularly drawn to one painting. He went back to the group to discuss how much it may be worth. He asked the group what they would want to pay for it, and he kept returning to the same picture, having another look. We had a look at other artifacts when walking through the museum, and he's particularly drawn to the statue of an eagle. He said, that's the best place to put it. Look at its feathers and markings. It's quite incredible. And he, along with others, came to the group first thinking they were going to come along to find a cure for this dementia. But because of his dementia, he'd regularly check that he was doing the right thing. And this was a way of maintaining his own control.
There's one more moment which was really special, I thought, where after we'd done a few sessions with that watercolor exhibition upstairs, we'd done a load of discussion and CST methods, and we'd also tried some kind of watercolor painting with the group as well. After this one session, one of the beneficiaries went out straight away after the session, and he went to buy a canvas and some paint, and then his partner the next week, she mentioned to us that he'd just been painting the whole week, and these few sessions that we had with him just completely reignited a kind of pre-existing interest in painting and art, and that I felt like that was really interesting and something quite tangible that he'd taken back home with him. It wasn't something that just stayed in the session. Yeah, thought that was really interesting. We also, another way of evaluating is we used a lot of kind of observational techniques, and you know, the facilitators made notes and comments throughout the sessions. So I'm just gonna read out one of the facilitator notes, and it was that a beneficiary joined in well with the word warm-up. She enjoyed looking at the prints of paintings we saw last week. This prompted lots of reminiscence about her time living in Switzerland. And in quotes here, she's got, I went there to improve my language skills. I could speak French, Italian, and German. I love language, it's fascinating, and I enjoyed being able to converse in a foreign language. So that was quite moving, actually, quite a full, yeah, really interesting.
So just got a few quotes. I mentioned that afterwards we evaluated with the family members of the group in our last session. Just picked out a few of these brilliant quotes from it. What, if any, you can see the benefits of hosting a memory group within a museum. It's very accessible to most people, promotes recall and memory, encourages interaction, it's inclusive. The subject matter is on the doorstep for so many interests. After attending the workshops, what, if any, were the positive changes with your loved ones? I found so-and-so to be more verbal with his communication. What, if any, are the benefits of hosting a memory group within a museum? Mum and I felt that hosting sessions in the museum has really added value. Engaging in activities and interacting with exhibits has really enhanced the sessions and added to them far above being in another location. And after attending the workshops, what, if any, were the positive changes with your loved ones? Mum was really keen to talk about the sessions, and her confidence has grown to attending independently. Mum has really benefited from having other topics of conversation and getting out the house. Yeah, so they're the things that some of the things that we picked out that we just thought were just absolutely brilliant. In terms of, it wasn't just then the session, but they were then coming home from the session and continuing to discuss about the things they learned and got up to. So what are the benefits of people living with dementia? Obviously, they felt safe and secure throughout the whole time. The research, as I've discussed already, has shown that it enhances cognition function and slows the rate of decline, meaning it improves the quality of life.
Aside from obviously lots of benefits for people with dementia, there's loads of benefits to us as a museum, which upskilling museum staff, which was me, that was just a really amazing learning experience for me, to be working with Memory Matters and a group that's got that kind of expertise, and that would be something that I bring to different areas of my work. So that was really useful. I also coordinate the volunteers at the museum, and I could just see this working really well with our volunteers, or and then that feeding into a wider kind of volunteer pool within our local community, and upskilling volunteers so that they're able to work with people with dementia. From an accessibility point of view as well, I feel like that kind of first-hand experience with working with people with dementia was really interesting in that museum setting, to know what our pitfalls might be in the museum in terms of seating, labeling, signposting, all of that type of thing, and where we might be able to improve. And that was another thing, we could kind of almost use that as a bit of a consultation activity. We sent everyone away with a form and an annual pass as well, so that they could come back at any time and give us some feedback on the museum space and how we could make it a more enjoyable experience for those with dementia and their families. And then using our collections and resources in different ways. Obviously, as loads of you will know, I'm sure, like, we've got so many objects that just stay behind closed doors and never see the light of day, and it's just really great to be using them in a different way. Increasing visitor numbers, this is definitely not something that we intended as an outcome, but and it's not an important one really for us with this project, but maybe a bit of a side benefit. Everybody has said that they would like to come back with their families and carers, which is really nice. And then mutual learning, so what we were talking about a little bit before with those stories. It's just so nice to be able to add layers of stories to these objects that we've got in the museum, and not just imparting the stories that we've got and that we hold in the museum collection, but sharing those and learning more from our collection, from the groups that we work with. So that was really, really exciting.
And the future, what's next? We've shown the importance, the effect and opportunities for those living with dementia for the museum and for the communities around as well. So that engagement is non-stigmatizing, it's non-clinical, yet can slow down the effect of deteriorating memory. Us here at Memory Matters, we've been running community CST groups for 10 years and are experts in CST and dementia. So by working in collaboration between our two organisations, we know this can become a sustainable project. The NHS in Cornwall, they provide 14 weeks as an initial treatment programme, but by providing maintenance sessions, only enhances the effect of those living with dementia. So Memory Matters would be delighted to work on a project to use this as a gold standard CST museum project with clear aims and objectives. All Memory Matters projects carry a sustainability profile and an exit strategy to ensure that once funding has ceased, that the project can continue. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. If anybody has any questions, me and Lauren will try to answer them, but I've also got my bosses Kate and Laura here just in case I don't know the answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Lauren. So we don't have any questions in the chat. Has anyone got any questions or comments? There's so much to take in there. That was absolutely fascinating. Even though I thought I knew a bit about it, it was just great to hear it in real time. Isabel?
You know what I'm going to say? An amazing project. When can we do it in Helston?
Oh, that's exactly what we wanted, I think, Dan, isn't it?
Yeah, we can. I can get in touch and we can look about how
Excellent.
we can get it down there as well. I'll be in touch.
Brilliant. Look forward to hearing from you.
I'm happy to connect people. Victoria?
Yes, thank you. That's such inspiring work. I'd like to pick up on your last point about sustainability and exit and how will the project be sustainable? I mean, there's obviously from Memory Matters point of view, but from the museum point of view, how is Royal Cornwall Museum committing to this on a long-term basis? Will you allocate resources so that it's embedded as part of the work, or is that, I don't know, is that the plan or maybe not? So if it's not the plan, what's the exit strategy?
We are definitely working on a plan, and that's kind of, it's so fresh that we've just kind of finished with this, and we're making sure that we're doing all of the evaluation and everything very, very thoroughly so that we can make it a sustainable thing and so that we can put our resources into it. But we haven't quite figured out how yet. So at the moment we've got, all these ideas floating up about how we could make it sustainable from the museum perspective and how we could get that group back. But I think that's kind of next steps for us, working that out.
Yeah. Can I ask, I mean, and maybe this is too soon, do you anticipate barriers or things that you will need to overcome within the museum structure to embed it long term, or is that not an issue?
I think probably I can think of three immediate ones, which is space, training, and and staff capacity, I guess, is the same issues. So space, we've got these amazing community rooms in the bottom of our museum, which are fully accessible for wheelchair access and toilets and everything like that. But they're quite in high demand, I guess. So it's finding a regular slot that works like that, and a space for that. I think noise, I was very aware of that during these sessions. We ran one session in the main gallery space and the acoustics were not quite right, I don't think. So I think having a quiet space is really, really important. And then also kind of training and staff capacity. So I think I would like to go down a kind of volunteer supported team, I guess, but making sure that there's someone there that's fully trained at the same time. Everyone there is fully trained, obviously, but yeah, I think that's probably our main two obstacles.
Oh, thank you. It'd be really interesting to hear how you do the follow on that. So much learning there for other places. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll keep in touch. Yeah.
Gemma?
Yeah, that was really, really fascinating and really lovely to hear about the project. Just going, Lauren, you were mentioning the training of volunteers. That could be something that quite a few museums would be interested in, actually. Just thinking as an opportunity for perhaps in the future, having a sort of cohort of us who could have volunteers who'd be interested in being trained up in that. Because I know at Will Martin, we have our memory cafe. And I've got 3 volunteers who help me with that, and it would be fantastic to have some training and updating of all of our skills.
I think that's a really good idea, isn't it, to kind of pool resources and yeah, I think that could work really well as a kind of network. I'd be very interested in.
Yeah, and and sharing our resources and things like that as well. That'd be really lovely to be a bit more joined up.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think we should keep talking about that.
Shall I put that on my to-do list and perhaps through Cornwall Museum Partnership? We could make best use of our collaborative approach. Susanna, I think you've got a question.
Yeah, I feel quite choked with this, really. It's been absolutely lovely. As some of you may know, I worked for RCM for 15 years. Maybe my face is on a dartboard on the back of one of the doors, I don't know. But I did sessions. I termed myself the reminiscence outreach worker. I gave myself a title with capital letters. And this is just lovely to have people coming in and relaxing into the museum space. I mean, it was glorious to go to care homes. This sounds less heavyweight, picking up those reminiscence boxes. The home sweet home, I'm sure you know, Lauren, is 15 kilos or 13 kilos. Yeah. So this is just lovely. I'm well done. I was very upset at the fact that the funding for the reminiscence boxes had to stop in 2012, and I could just see them and know that sort of unlocking that museum artifacts can give to lives that might be closing in or would be closing in. Those boxes, those resources were going to sit on the shelf, and they did for some time. So well done. It's absolutely glorious. There's no stopping you now. Well done. Fantastic.
Thanks, Susanna. I'd love to pick your brains about outreach stuff as well. The stuff that we're doing with Memory Matters, we'd love to expand on that. And that's definitely not the end of our work with people with dementia. And those boxes have definitely come in handy with those sessions as well. They've been amazing, that kind of tactile, they're really great resource.
Thank you, Susanna.
You're very welcome. Love to.
Lovely comment, and nurture that connection. Has anyone else got any other questions before we move on? But what I will do is I'll connect anybody who needs connecting with Dan. I know Dan will probably share his email in the chat anyway, but I can always follow up, for example, Isabel. But if I have a look at some sort of collaborative training, would be great. Hang on a second.
If I could just say, Celine, I think Dan is really brave, having given that presentation with his 2 directors in the virtual room. So well done, Dan.
Thank you. I'll wipe the sweat off my brows now.
I'm sure we'll have other opportunities in the course of the morning to talk about memory cafes and where they can fit into making greater links with museums. And I know in the room there's so much experience from that having happened over the years already, and how we can build on that and think about that combined resource for volunteers. But a bit on that later on, perhaps.
That's great. Thank you, Tim. There's a little note here in the chat. I just want to draw everyone's attention to it from Joanne, who's one of our citizen curators at CMP, our amazing cohort, but he's also involved with the Folklore Library and Archive, and is interested in connecting with people. So if people have a quick look at the chat, that would be great. And Joanne has put the email address in there, which I'll also include in the follow-up message, which will hold this recording too, so nobody will miss that in the chat if people are trying to sort of frantically scribble down people's emails addresses. Don't worry too much about that. So I think we're going to just stay momentarily with Royal Cornwall Museum and just segue into the session about Wadebridge Memory Cafe, because I know that Lauren and Georgia Murphy, who is one of our current cohort of trainee curators, were also able to connect around associated issues. So I don't know if Georgia or Lauren would like to speak, or Tim indeed.
Yeah, fab. I guess I had a little bit of talk prepared, but I know we can just talk for a little while about that. But yeah, Tim and I met quite a while ago, and we were just talking about, I don't know, Tim, I know that you're really interested in kind of visual culture and dementia and how that works, and that also seems like a very natural progression with with museums. And we kind of did our first ever virtual museum tour with one of Tim's groups a few weeks ago, and it was just an amazing experience. Again, another massive learning experience for both me and Georgia. Georgia was co-facilitating as well, and it was just really good. Yeah, I guess the way in which we did it is we did kind of pre-recorded tours of two of our climate crisis exhibitions that we've got going at the moment. So Georgia's one that she's curated herself, and then the Tony Foster watercolor one that we saw in the other slideshow, and that worked really well. So we did a kind of recorded video tours where we could pause whenever people wanted to kind of stop and look at a painting in more detail. And then we did a bit of kind of virtual object handling, I guess, where we got some objects up and drew them closer to the screen, and it was quite an informal session with a lot of chat and a lot of discussion, and Georgia selected a few photos as well, some really old historic photos to show everyone, and that worked really well. And I guess my biggest take from it was just less is more, and just a few images, really short video. It's quite low in terms of resources and facilitation. We could just have really, really long conversations and discussions. That's my spiel, but I don't know, Tim or Georgia, if you have anything else.
Well, I do. I've got some outcomes from that group if we're interested in looking at those. But Georgia, I don't want to stop you from jumping in. The group that you met was the Thursday Food for Thought group, which is a virtual group. We've been meeting online throughout the time of restrictions. We run a number of groups. The Thursday group is focused very much on the basis of a cognitive stimulation approach. It's all about gaining opinions and having lots of different issues to talk around. So it lives up to its name of Food for Thought. So the group are delighted to have this opportunity to visit the museum virtually. It's the interesting thing about anticipation, isn't it? Apparently it's the anticipation of events that really alters our brain chemistry, and so the group were really looking forward to it. And the week before, they were even talking about what clothes they should select to dress appropriately for going to the museum. But I'll talk more about that in a second. But just checking in with you, Georgia. I wonder what you made of it all.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I was quite nervous about. Oh, can you hear me? Yeah. I was really nervous because I'd never really done anything like that before, or kind of done a kind of online tour. But I really enjoyed it, and kind of want to echo what Lauren said, really. I think it was, just really nice to be reaching people who might not necessarily be able to come to the museum. And I think it was really interesting, the kind of less is more is definitely with those photographs, and like how much discussion they prompted, and people bringing their kind of own memories and their own thoughts into the session was just really incredible. But I loved it, and would definitely love to explore doing kind of more things like that and being able to make our exhibitions kind of accessible in different ways.
And I was struck by the dialogue. There was a really strong dialogue between the participants and yourselves. I wonder how you found that from your angle.
I found it was a bit of a scary thing, I think, just to drop into a group like that. In some ways, we'd have a bit of experience with the you know, the Memory Matters projects and everything, working with a fairly similar group, but in terms of, you know, new dynamics and everything like that, I found that that was a bit, yeah, I don't know, just dropping into a new group is always difficult, isn't it? But I think the way that, you know, Tim was there, obviously just bringing people back into the room all the time. And I think that just really helped, having that third person. And obviously, you know, Tim being the third person and you knowing the group really well and picking up on different points. And also the kind of, before the session, Tim had said, you know, these are the specific interests or some specific interests of the group. And it meant that we could tailor, you know, the bits of the exhibition or the tour or the photographs perhaps that Georgia selected or the objects that I selected. It meant that we could make sure that they were about fishing or animals or whatever the kind of interest. So yeah, the discussion was, I felt like all of the prep had helped that, but it was really nice to kind of, I think, yeah, it was great.
Yeah, a lot of the conversation felt quite natural. I thought it flowed really, really nicely, and it was just really interesting to see the different tangents that came off. And especially although my exhibition was focused on climate, it was really nice to see what other things came out from that as well. Like the whole conversation wasn't necessarily about the climate crisis, but I think that was actually really nice that it brought in new things with that as kind of the base.
Would you like to hear what people made of it? Shall I show some slides about the comments that we got for the afternoon? Is that okay if I share then,
Please do. It should be fine. I'm going to assume everybody really probably does want to hear about this because it's just so fascinating. I think
just before I do that, can I just do some acknowledgements? Can I just invite you to meet Kirsty Dexter, who joined the Cornwall Memory Cafe network as their network coordinator this week. So this is the end of Kirsty's first working week with us. We haven't had anybody working with us before, as we're all volunteers, so it's absolutely brilliant to have Kirsty on board. So hi, Kirsty.
Welcome.
Yeah, hi, nice to meet everyone.
And I'd love to reacquaint myself with Helen. So Helen Raw from the Weybridge Museum, and just to say it's absolutely brilliant to see you here, Helen, and I know you're an expert on all things Memory Cafe. And Suzanne, I just wanted to say it's brilliant to see you again, Suzanne. You came to the Weybridge Memory Cafe when we were in the primary school years ago, and people really enjoyed those exhibits then. And Isabel, I just wanted to say that you, when I came up to see you that time, you told me all about that videoing project you did with a care home, and I was just mindful of that when Lauren and Georgia were showing the video clips for us at the Food for Thought, because we had anticipated, first of all, it would be a walk-around exhibition. So it was the sense that the tech would work and we would go and see the exhibits and have some interaction. But that didn't quite work out for your technical challenge within the museum, Lauren, I think.
No, I think that's one thing that we have to work around in the museum, and that's definitely a kind of improvement for next time. With, you know, with this massive old building and our Wi-Fi is a little bit rubbish, and we just thought it might, if we were doing a walk around, the chance of it cutting out was actually pretty high. So we found that recorded video tour did, you know, felt like that worked all right, and the kind of, in terms of video quality and risk, that felt like the best solution for us, I think. But that's something that we can work on in the future. You know, if we were going to do other virtual sessions, I think getting a strong Wi-Fi connection is probably, top of the list.
Any unexpected gift in that, though, was that virtually we wouldn't be able to get close to the collection, but on the video we could go back and have it replayed, so we could go slowly and stop at things along the way. So that turned out to be an interesting addition, I think. Yeah. Hey, well, I'll show you this.
Yeah, I'm sorry I was muted, but it would be good to have a liaison there, Tim.
Well, as from today, we can have that, Helen. I'll just... so the X's, I'll explain. We've been meeting Food for Thought for quite a time, and we've been working our way through the alphabet, thinking of those cognitively stimulating conversations we can have connected with letters. And it just so happened, the way this fell is that it was going to be the afternoon when we would have been talking about X. So the participants rejoiced in coming up with the expedition to the exhibition. And a virtual excursion. And they made many comments about that in the course of the afternoon, I think, Lauren. At the end of the session, are you able to see okay? See? Yep, okay. So at the end of all of these sessions, I send by email a link to an evaluation form, which simply asks the participants. And for people living with dementia, we've had some really interesting success in Wadebridge, introducing people to the use of their technology and helping them out by lending them easier to use resources. For some people, it's still a challenge when engaging with the screen in anything other than passively watching and talking. But we have got quite a good response on our forms. Carers or friends do help people to complete their evaluations. And so we just ask some simple questions. How satisfied were you with this session? Please rate your experience of what we did and then how we did things, and to sum things up and suggestions for improvement. And so you can see over on this side, in answer to the how satisfied were you with the session, and you can see how those responses were rated. Rate what we did, and you can see that those responses, just a little change from 5 to 4, and how we did things. So there was the sense there was no upsets along the way, Lauren, and it seemed to run very smoothly. Oops. Now I've got a range of comments which I'll let you read through. So don't be too embarrassed here, Lauren and Georgia. So the guides were lovely and answered our questions well. I enjoyed it for a change of focus. Interesting alternative to our usual encounter. Great afternoon. It was so very interesting, and it would be great if we could arrange a real trip to the museum. And that's there's been a real buzz about that since, actually. There's an apparent first, here we are. This is a good use of the X's, exercise in presentation. I thought the young ladies were excellent and certainly promoted their exhibits extremely well. A thoroughly enjoyable experience and well worth repeating when we have a different letter of the alphabet to give zip to our thoughts. There we go. The person who wrote that had been so low in mood a few months ago. It was really difficult for them to talk, and it's absolutely brilliant to see that they've been able to engage in this in such a humorous way. Good to have a virtual tour of the paintings. I thought it'd be good for us to look and discuss Tony Foster's paintings in more detail during the other sessions. And that choice of the paintings was fantastic, I thought. It really gave the participants food for thought, which was the intent. Quite a long bit of feedback here. I thoroughly enjoyed the afternoon and found Lauren and Georgia's slideshow well presented and informative. The general theme was climate change, and I thought the various ways that this was covered was well thought out and interesting. I especially liked the paintings in the special exhibition, so much so that I've decided to go and see them at the museum to get the real sense of them and the message they're trying to get across. I think this is a wonderful way to educate people to the changes we all need to make and to try to rectify the mistakes that have been made. Lauren and Georgia should be congratulated for all their hard work and effort they went into giving us the opportunity. This is written by somebody who a number of, well, just before Christmas had some really physical ill health, necessitating surgery, very serious surgery. And I think that the food for thought opportunities has given her the opportunity, some support in recovering. these combined problems led to her husband needing to go into care in the middle of the COVID crisis. So it's been a really difficult time for that person, and I'm just it's really encouraging to see what she's written there.
Thanks for sharing that, Tim.
Oh, and I wondered what you think of this. This is your feedback. I don't know whether you want it on the screen, Lauren and Georgia.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think it's mostly things that I've already said before. I guess with Tim's organisation was really good, and having the kind of really strategic planning and signposting to the subjects of interest beforehand. That was the most useful thing ever in us facilitating and tailoring our session to what the interests of the group would be. Yeah, and then again, sorry, things about Wi-Fi issues and technology. And then there was another comment on the bottom here, next time preparing less of a slideshow and more of a collection of images. So I think that would be a really good way of approaching it next time, so that we've got like a stack of images that we can be really flexible with, that we could, we could dip into them, dependent on what the group is interested in. A slideshow doesn't quite work like that because you're flicking between screens quite a lot. And shadowing a group session before the week, that would be really, I thought that might have been beneficial, but it was just as things went, we just got really, really busy in that week, so we couldn't do that, but that would have been amazing, I think, which Tim did offer before, but that was us.
Yeah, that was just a challenge at the time, wasn't it?
Mm.
Thoughts on improving things? I really like this one, to diary another link with the Cornwall Museum next year. I was hoping it would be sooner, so I think if we look on it being sooner, that would be really, really positive. And we've got some other plans in the pipeline, Lauren, haven't we? Thinking about physically come and visit you. And you've got that real temptation of the store visit. I think that could be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, that would be fab. There's one issue as well. I don't, not an issue, but something that we've come across quite a lot. I know George will probably be able to speak about this, but when talking with the climate crisis, how do we do that with, it's just an open question, I don't know, but how do we talk about the climate crisis where everyone is still feeling uplifted by the end of the session? And, it's one thing for people to feel interested and informed and to gain a lot and to have discussion with everyone, but to make sure no one's feeling, and I think we were all right with that in that session, but that's something that I've always been wary of when we're doing our current programming, I think. So that's something that we're conscious of.
I think it was your selection of the objects. I think that was really helpful, because there wasn't anything in that. There was plenty of opportunity to connect with reminiscence and for people to talk about earlier times without dwelling too much on the difficult times that might be ahead. But of course, we had the advantage of the Port Isaac fisherman, who was well able to describe the real happenings of environmental change in his description of the depletion of the fishing stocks from his own lived experience, which I think could almost add to your exhibition, really.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what's so exciting about, that kind of mutual exchange again and that discussion. That's really, well, thanks for sharing all that feedback as well, Tim. That's really nice to see all of that. Thank you.
Well, my pleasure. Thanks for giving me the chance for the conversation.
Thank you both. I think, and Georgia, I think as well, it makes me really reflect on what you were just saying about the importance of that intergenerational connectivity around issues like the climate emergency, and the opportunity there for positive reflections in terms of witnessing. And then I think one of the comments that was some of the feedback said about the how well you'd clearly communicated, Georgia and Lauren, the opportunity to rectify mistakes. So it's not just doom and gloom, it's actually that sort of opportunity for moving forward in a positive fashion together in terms of intergenerational work. And it also reminded me that, of course, it was the Only Connect Partnership Board meeting where Lauren and Tim were able to connect. And if anybody would like to join that group, I'm quite certain as a member of that it would be fine. So if you would like me to connect you with Ellie and the Only Connect group, which I thoroughly recommend, I always make time for that group in my diary. And I'm sure if you just send me your email address and I could add you to that, I know you'd be warmly welcomed. It's a very inclusive space, and there's always room for new ideas, and positive reflections come out of that often, don't they, Tim, as we know. Does anyone have any questions for Lauren, Georgia, Tim, before we move on to our final segment? Susanna?
Sorry, just a little observation. Sorry, I sort of jumped in, but as you may know, Isabel and Angela, lovely to see Angela, and people from Museum of Cornish Life did a project with live sessions into care homes, and this the Wi-Fi connection was an issue. We turned it into an advantage, really. And if the Wi-Fi just went wobbly between different parts of the museum, we sort of went, oh, and then carried on with, and it gave us a good opportunity to carry on the conversation. And then the participants, you know, we would go, oh, here we go again, but nobody was upset by it. But what we did find that helped, and one care home I worked in was a big old granite building, and the Wi-Fi was really tricky, but using a personal hotspot on a mobile alongside the iPad, sorry, branding, we found that really helped, didn't it, Angela? We had sessions. I sort of, you can either, if you've got an in-person visit, boost your own data sort of clump, which I did, and then you've got that opportunity to use that personal hotspot on your own phone, and that made a big difference. So then it may not be as I realize that RCM is a big old solid building, and you may still have a problem, but if you can throw a bit of data at it from everybody's, gather up all the staffs, sort of gather up their phones first thing in the morning, come on, put your phone in here, and use all their data. It did help a lot from being super wobbly, didn't it, Angela? We were able to huff it up. I think, yes, I depleted your care home's hotspot as well. You have no conscience. When you want to connect, you just do it. And at the museum, we had a lovely young person, an apprentice, and she offered her hotspot. So yes, no conscience in there at all. But it might help.
Thanks, Susanna. That's so. I love what you're saying as well about the using the Wi-Fi, the dodgy Wi-Fi to your advantage, and that being a tool for, you know, space for discussion. That's just magic, because it always makes me feel quite nervous, the technical side of things, and actually to know that you don't need to be scared about that, and you know, there's a lot of advantages to it being a bit dodgy. That's quite, I like that. Thank you.
Well, Cornwall is rich in dodgy Wi-Fi, so we should be wealthy on this topic. Thank you, Susanna. It's just really practical, really helpful suggestion to remember. Anybody else got any questions before we move on? Okay, so that was a really lovely link into Tim's group with the Weybridge Memory Cafe. And if you bear with me for a moment, I'm going to share my screen and just a couple of images that relate to the next session that we're going to talk briefly about. So I'm going to just provide a little bit of background for the information that Tim will then go on to share. So around this time last year, towards the end of last year, Cornwall Museum's Partnership were contacted by the National Gallery with the aim of trying to find somewhere that was not a museum or gallery to bring part of their collection, Van Huysen's Flowers in a Terracotta Vase, which you can see before you. Unfortunately, I'd already met with Tim at an earlier date where we had imagined, this was pre-COVID, an opportunity to take a piece from a collection out to the community. And that place was actually in Weybridge, the Betterman Centre, which provides a number of different services for a wide variety of people living in and with different needs, and is also just a lovely, wonderful, warm space to be, and has a great cafe. Always important, as we know. And so that was our proposition. the theme that we were given, which was one of the 6 ways to well-being, was connect. So that was appropriate for what we had in mind, which was using the painting to connect as many different people in as many different ways as possible. The first bit of outreach that I was able to do in preparation, and this was slightly tricky because we couldn't actually advertise in any way, shape or form the painting or the location or the dates because of the security around having an item of this scale and value out in a community and in an unsecured building, so to speak, an unalarmed space. But I was able to take copies of the image out to groups. So I first of all worked with some Beaver Scouts who were able to write responses to the painting. You can see a couple of them there. So they were aged between 5 and 7. Then I went out to a forest school, a local forest school, and worked with some slightly older young people running up to about the age of 14 in a very similar way. And some of those images went into the exhibition itself. But the thing that we're really here to talk about today, and I suppose what I would say about that is that we're talking about memory, and we know that museums and galleries are excellent, not just in the ways that we've heard from Memory Matters, but also in creating memories. So this was quite a memorable project to be involved in, I think, for people of all ages. We were also able to work with the Sensory Trust, who've been mentioned today, with one of their groups who meet at different locations across Cornwall. And because we could only have the painting in Weybridge, down in the bottom right here, you can see a rendition of the painting that a local florist created for me with great skill and dexterity and real timing to get as many as many flowers in bloom as possible at the same time that related to the image. And then I took that arrangement, and it was like a floral sculpture really, about as big as I am, out to the group, and we worked on drawings and images from the real life recreation of it. So it was just kind of looking at creative ways to connect people in a multi-sensory way across the ages. And that was fantastic. A massive thanks to Ellie Robbins-Carter for helping me realise that on a beautiful sunny day. But what Tim and I would really like to talk about is what happened with the Memory Cafe and the painting. So Tim, if you would like to talk about what happened from your point of view, because although I was a participant, I was absolutely in awe of the way Tim engineered the whole day and the group.
Thanks very much, Celine. I'd just like to check in with Helen. Helen, did you get a chance to see the painting when it was in Weybridge?
No, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay. I think that was probably because I was just thinking of the museum, it would have been great had we been able to share the news in advance that the painting was actually coming. And as you said, Celine, that was one of our biggest challenges because we knew this was on the horizon. And it was fantastic because when I first met Celine, we were meeting from the angle of the Weybridge Dementia Action Alliance and Concern Weybridge, thinking, well, how can we arrange with those people who hold cultural heritage resources in Cornwall, how could we arrange for loans of those to happen to the Weybridge Memory Cafe, or actually to Concern Weybridge, which is the local charity that owns the John Betjeman Centre, which we'll see in a second, how we could show our credentials to be trusted with some works of art. Celine and I were talking about the brilliant Cornwall Schools collection. So that's where we started, Celine, wasn't it? And we met one another through the networking with Laura and Memory Matters. So I think it just shows how all this connectivity pays benefits in the long run.
The space constraints in our little museum do make things rather difficult, but we have a visit this month from St Mimber Primary School.
Fantastic. Yep.
But it'll have to be done in sections because of the space constraints.
Indeed, and I do remember the Memory Cafe came to visit the collection in Weybridge when it wasn't in the current museum, when it was close to the furniture shop, I seem to remember, Helen.
Yes, that's right.
Anyway, I digress. So I'll get back to the mission of talking about Jan van Huysen's visit to Cornwall. bear with me 1 second, because I've just realised that you can see how I've mastered this technology over the time, can't you?
Don't worry, Tim, you take your time. Yeah, it was very frustrating, Helen, and not least of all, CMP to be very limited in who we could contact. And it's almost an impossibility. In terms of creating a case study, it was very helpful to us to explore the opportunities and challenges. And the big challenge was the fact that we couldn't tell anybody about it until it was actually there. And it was only there for a week. So it felt like it flew by. Okay, Tim, I'll let you take the reins.
Yes, it certainly did feel like it flew by. So welcome to the John Betjeman Centre, which is the railway station in Wadebridge, where the Memory Cafe has been meeting for the last number of years, and where Jan van Huysen visited to the Memory Cafe on the 12th of June. And that term, Jan van Huysen visits, is the National Gallery's name for the tour around the country. And we'll just talk about in a while where it went, where our painting went after it left Wadebridge, is the way that the Memory Cafe talks about it. And we've been trying to keep in touch with the painting. And Helen, I'm going to mention some Wadebridge facts in a minute, and I'm sure they'll be quite wrong, so do correct me. So this is a painting of Jan van Huysen, and I think you can see his dates at the bottom there. So 1682 to 1749. So for a moment I was just reflecting on, well, what would it have been like if he had visited Wadebridge at that time? Well, I'm imagining that this painting that you'll find in Pencarrow House by Francis Toyne captures round about the same time, actually a bit later than his date, but I think this is what Wadebridge would have looked like in the lifetime of Jan van Huysen. And it had been dominated by the bridge, which, if I'm right, Helen, would have been standing for 300 years by then. Yes, still looking very much like it does there. Anyone living in Wadebridge with the traffic at the moment would know that the traffic is held up because of the work on the bridge, so we get that feel for what it would have been like having a very narrow bridge. And we'll see that, in fact, Wadebridge, the little community of Wade, was very tiny, whereas this part over here, its Bridge End, is the big part of the community. Now, part of me showing you this is you'll see that this is, I'm guessing that this is the Cornwall River coming down here. And if you're familiar to Wadebridge or not, you'll know that the cinema is just here now. And I'm thinking it wouldn't have been far from the Betjeman Centre that the artist would have been sketching when he first presented this painting. So I think there is a connection with the Betjeman Centre and this work from the position. But I'm imagining also, Helen, that this time that the major industry would have been carrying the sand, getting the sand up to, from the estuary, up to the agricultural land around,
Yes.
owned
Yes.
by...
I can never get over Wadebridge having a railway service ahead of London. It really is the centre of the universe, isn't it? But it was originally for transporting sea sand to the inland farms.
Thank you very much for that, Helen, and that leads on very nicely to the next piece of art I'd like to show, which is from the Science Museum collection, the 1960s poster art. And if you look very carefully, if we were thinking of, we'll see that the railway, picking up on, let's pick up on the railway point first of all. So Helen's point, it was the third railway in the world to be built, and you'll see that the Wadebridge station operated from, well, the line operated from 1834 to 1967, and this poster captures the service known as the Atlantic Coast Express in 1960. But the important thing I'm trying to convey is if the painting were brought by train, it would have been able to go direct to the station, and it would have been able to do that in probably around about 6 hours, as the Atlantic Coast Express left Waterloo at 11 o'clock every day and would get to Wadebridge just to interrupt the traffic with the level crossing, I would imagine, around about 5 o'clock. But he didn't travel this way at all, so there is no record of Jan van Huysen ever visiting Wadebridge until his painting, Flowers in a Terracotta Vase, arrived in June this year. Just pause for a second with this painting for a moment, and I'd just like you to ask you to butterfly spot. How many butterflies are you able to see? Okay. If you have a piece of paper around, you might want to jot that down, or you may not. Okay. But those butterflies become important as the afternoon goes on. So this is the work. So I was after a painting from the school's collection at best. Never did I imagine that we would be entrusted to have an afternoon with a work from the National Gallery. And so the painting came complete with its own wall. Here we have Jeremy, who's the manager at the Betjeman Centre for Concern Wadebridge, and they made a room available. So the painting had its own room. The painting was sealed in its own atmosphere. I didn't realise that it slept at night in a cardboard box, which was a bit of an anticlimax, but that was the condition. It had its own security team round the clock, and they were a mind of information and tremendous characters. And it was open to public display from 10 o'clock until 4. There was no booking required. It was free to access, and people could just turn up. But of course, we were still in restrictions. The Prime Minister's decision to release restrictions didn't arrive until after this. So we were caught with the COVID security measures, which really restricted numbers in the room, but with the security team there, they looked after that brilliantly. And certainly the size of one of them would make nobody would disagree about that. And of course, we all needed to wear masks. And so I think it was around about 6 people at a time were allowed in the room, I think, which was a marvellous opportunity to see this work. So between us, Celine and I organised 2 encounters. We arranged for the Rotary Club that hadn't met for 18 months, but had been meeting once a week on the Zoom, to come along to see the work. And we needed to create a COVID secure way of doing that. So we arranged for the Rotary Club to come. They came for an evening visit, small group viewing, and a talk by Celine. Well done, Celine. I thought the feedback was really positive from them about the evening. But of course, the real reason they came, the real reason I thought that we should invite them, was to test out how we could make it a success on the Saturday, really, to see what small group work could be like with the Rotarians, and to have a practice run with the evaluation tools. Now, Dan has mentioned the UCL evaluation tools that I suggested could be used for evaluation of the museum project. And so I needed to test out those tools on the Rotarians to see how that looked, to see if they would be workable to use with the Memory Cafe on the following Saturday. So that was the overlap between the two. The Rotarians just thought we were being very generous, but I did make it quite clear that they were contributing to the success of the Saturday by coming along. So the Memory Cafe had been meeting on Zoom on its Tuesday meetings and its Thursday food for thought, and on every Saturday, either as a small cafe connecting as friends or as a Memory Cafe online. So we had been meeting online, but nobody had met for 18 months. So on that afternoon, it was going to be a Saturday afternoon, and we wanted to think up a range of engagement opportunities. It's been a really difficult time for everyone, but it's been a particularly difficult time for people living with dementia and their carers. So we are very mindful that the people were coming together for the first time. So I was thinking, although we had a focus on the painting, for some people the painting might have been incidental. The important thing was to come back together. And Celine, keep an eye on the clock for me and tell me when our listening is being challenged. Okay, so this is what happened. So we ran it as a hybrid event. We'd never done that before either. So we had 20 people in the building. We needed to keep us divided up into small groups. And we had 5 people at home on Zoom. And so we had the people at home on Zoom. We were communicating with them with an iPad, and we had them projected onto the big screen so the people in the centre could see the 5 people at home on Zoom. We ran it an introduction and welcome. We then split up into 4 groups, and then at the end we had evaluation and some endings. That was the plan. Beforehand, we'd done a risk assessment, particularly important for those COVID issues. People wore visors, not masks. We maintained the social distancing. Importantly, we had some tea. We couldn't have that together, which was the challenge, so we had that in our small groups, almost breaking the rule that no tea or drinks are allowed to go near that painting in the room. But as always, we started off in the same way, and I don't think we've changed this slide, Helen, since you would come along to the Memory Cafe. So this is our levelling slide, which is always to say our Memory Cafe principle is that we aim to be failure-free. So we always encourage this idea that there's no such thing as a wrong answer. We're not interested in getting things right or wrong. We're all here to help each other succeed, and the aim is to share memories over a cuppa. So we reminded everyone of that, almost as just a beginning point to refocus us. And I think we also had a few words of wisdom on how to spend time with the painting, I think, Celine. So what I'd like to share with you is how this has been reported in this fantastic journal, which is, as you'll see, this is issue 168. It's not on public sale. It is the Weybridge Memory Cafe newsletter. So it's written by someone else other than me. And so we had a title for the afternoon, which was Blooming Pictures. And it was reported in this way. So lots of excitement this afternoon as a number of us came together at the Betjeman Centre the first time since March. We were there to view a special painting that was visiting us from the National Gallery. And the way we split those activities up, we identified opportunities to be an encounter with Van Huysum. So I was really keen that we would just have the painting sat in the room as another person. And so the chairs were arranged that so people could, 5 people could sit with the painting, and Celine and Isabella from the Keep in Bodmin. Did you volunteer for this, or were you a press person, Celine? I can't remember how it worked, but the 2 of you agreed to look after the painting. That was ever so helpful, because not only for your expertise, but it also meant that the security men felt that they could trust you. And so the security team withdrew for the afternoon, which was absolutely fantastic. Then there was a response in collage that was led by a carer. Then we had an opportunity for video viewing and taking a closer look about the picture. And then there was a response in poetry. And all of these things happened at the same time. So they were concurrent. So we had small groups in different parts of the building. And my role was to try to usher those people around, as well as having the team at home on the iPad, and how we tried to involve them as well. So the encounter, and you can see how it's reported below. So the author here describes the realism with exquisite, not only from the leaves and flowers, but the terracotta pot, fruits and insects. And I'm thinking, Celine, that in the room it was just a big conversation, that people were introduced to the work, and then they had the opportunity to get as close or not to the work, and to be able to engage in a conversation about it.
Yeah, it was very, very organic. And one of the nice things about it was the opportunity to just sit with the painting and talk in an informal way, which was where the centre really came into its own, because it has that atmosphere of being very welcoming, and probably something that all museums and galleries could learn from, in terms of the way it was an informal space to be in. And although there was security around the painting, as you said, it felt unguarded, it felt intimate. And the curator, Gracie Duval, who came from the National Gallery with the painting, was really keen to point out that normally this painting is first of all very high up on the wall because of the scale of it and the way it was painted. It's actually designed to be viewed that way, and it's also would have been, of course, viewed normally with a great number of other paintings, so you wouldn't have that one-to-one contact with it, and nor would you have the opportunity to see it at such close quarters as the artist would have painted it. So it felt like a really privileged experience, but it was extremely relaxed, and conversation was really wide-ranging and interesting from my point of view.
Thanks very much for that, Celine. And the collage response began with a prepared sheet of paper like this with a vase. And as the author writes here, each group spent time with Sandra, where everyone produced their own collage, interpretation of the painting. A coloured background with an empty urn was provided, that's the word, an urn, and cutouts of flowers, fruits and insects were provided to stick on them and produce a picture. I'd like to point out here that John Betcherman was here in spirit. You can see his sculpted head, his hat and his suitcase. But more importantly, the bouquet of flowers that you made reference to earlier, Celine. And that was there as a prompt. And everyone was given the opportunity to take part. Again, if you would like to participate in keeping an eye on the butterflies, I'll just run through a selection of the collages. And you can see how many butterflies there are in each of the pictures. And you'll see that people really took an ownership of their works. Whilst that was happening, of course, the other group were watching a video, and as it's described here, it took several elements of the painting: the vase, the artist's signature, the arrangements of flowers and the nest, and recorded experts in each field to provide detailed background information. And so the way that this was ran is that people sat around the screen, as you can see, but the video was paused at regular points to allow dialogue. And you'll see this person has here the all-important folder that was provided by the National Gallery. It has the image of the painting on the front, and inside it breaks down all of the makeup, all of the flowers and the insects in the painting. At the same time, there was a response in poetry. And as you can read here, Jane led a creative writing group, which I hear was hugely enjoyed. You can see that everyone had their own brochure about the painting, which was useful, reminder and a lovely memento of the afternoon. It even came complete with some flower seeds to plant in your garden. So there'll be lots of plants coming up later in the year, I'm sure. I forgot to mention that each team came up with its own name. So this is the slide from the Delphiniums, but you can see what happened. Each person in that group was asked to come up with one word connected with seeing, feeling, well, all of the senses actually, taste, smell and hearing. So just one word each person was asked to contribute. And that then was collected up and turned into a poem, which you'll have the opportunity to hear in just a second. As you can see by the clock, we're running over time because we should stop at 4. So the events actually took longer than anticipated. And there's no surprise with that. And so the time for evaluation was a little more rushed than we would have liked particularly. And again, we used the tools from the UCL Museum Wellbeing Measures Toolkit, which I'm very happy to talk about at another time. Then we did the same feedback afterwards. We sent, in the same way I described earlier, I sent an email afterwards, and people were able to indicate how satisfied they were with the session, rate their experience of what we did, and then how we did things. And then the verdict, what people had to say. We've been looking forward to viewing the beautiful painting, and we're not disappointed. As I thought this would be the most important thing. It was so lovely to see so many friends. A unique experience. For a first real cafe, I thought it went well considering the restrictions, and it was a restrictive environment. I think one person just summed it up with being memorable. And the activities were a real bonus and everyone enjoyed them. There was there was appreciation for those people joining us via Zoom. And I'm so pleased that we did engage with people on Zoom. It was really positive feedback that we had on the screen poll that I asked people to complete. But I just want to finish off with the tour. So before it came to us, our painting had been shown in Great Yarmouth in Norfolk. It came to us. It sadly left and went off to Barnsley. It nipped over to Lincoln, up to Perth, and ended up in Belfast. So you can see the different settings that it was displayed in. And I'd just like to play for you the poem that resulted from all those words. So I'll end with the poem.
Dutch masterpiece. We went to see the painting. What an awe-inspiring sight. To view up close a masterpiece, an opportunity not to be missed. The picture was a still life of flowers, fruit and insects, tumbling from a terracotta pot, to some quite overwhelming. We could almost smell the fragrance of the roses and carnations. We could imagine the feel of the petals and the taste of the delicious juicy grapes. We admired the terracotta pot, how proud and strong it looked. We tried to find the many butterflies hiding between the flowers and fruit. We saw the lone blue bottle perching on the pot and wondered where the bird had gone that had left its eggs and nest behind. We loved the vibrant colours and the beauty of the flowers. We felt envious of the talent of the artist Jan van Huysum. The painting had embraced us all and opened up our senses. We were glad of the experience to see this amazing work of art. Dutch masterpiece.
So thank you very much. And I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. That was a brilliant whistle top tour, and I can't repeat enough how in awe I was of the way Tim has not only nurtured and maintained the group throughout lockdown with meetings throughout every single week, but then I think I just reflect on what Dan and Lauren found in their evaluation about the group feeling safe and secure. And that's certainly how that group felt. And for many of them, it was the first time leaving the house in 15 months to come and see the painting. So it's a huge privilege for me to be part of that. And I know that Isabella and I, training curator who joined me, learnt a tremendous amount. So, and I hope you have today. Has anyone got any questions for Tim? I'm conscious of the time, and I know that lunch will be calling for everybody, but does anyone have anything they'd like to know more about immediately? As I said earlier, I'm happy to connect people afterwards.
I do have one question. When I was playing that track, did you just get a picture of me, or did you see the person who was reading the poem?
We saw you.
That wasn't meant to be. Kirsty has in her objectives helping the board of the Memory Cafe network with their IT skills. So I need to understand why the video I clipped and put on there and I tested worked perfectly, but it didn't this morning. So there we go, a learning a learning point for me. Sorry about that, folks.
It's fine too. It was great. Does anyone have any questions at all? Susanna.
I have been to the Betjeman Centre before, and I know it's a sort of wonderful space. You seem to have lots of room to be able to keep people in sort of separate groups. I wonder how do you think you could have, would you not have accepted the painting had you not had so much room? How would people manage with a smaller space, do you think, and distancing them but not breaking the thread?
That's a really interesting question. I think we were really privileged with this space at the Betjeman Centre. Of course, there were no other groups happening, which is quite really unusual. So we had the use of the whole of the centre, which we do on a Saturday afternoon, actually, for the Memory Cafe, usually. It's interesting when we looked at the photographs of those other places, because it'd gone to lots of different places. You know, one is an outside market, the other was a food bank. So it's interesting how others would have got around that social distancing challenge. So I was just relieved that we could do it in the Betjeman Centre.
Yeah, it was extremely accessible, wasn't it? That was the main thing for us. It was kind of a juggling act between meeting the National Gallery's requirements around security and environmental conditions, which weren't too restrictive, but were hurdles to be overcome. And then making sure that it was accessible to the groups that we were hoping to connect with, and who we were successful to connect with. And there were some limitations to the project in terms of things like ideally the schools. So we chose the venue partly because the schools were so close by, but because of the times we were operating in, the schools weren't able to visit the painting during school time. So I instead went out to the schools and connected them with the work, which is not as exciting as you can imagine, but hopefully went a small way towards achieving the initial objective as reaching as many people as possible who wouldn't ordinarily connect with the collection in any respect, let alone so locally. But we're hoping, aren't we, Tim, that we can use this as a jumping off point to begin similar-ish work with local collections.
Absolutely, and I'd just like to mention the memory cafes. You know, the network of memory cafes before restrictions. There are 40 memory cafes meeting very regularly. Throughout restrictions, most memory cafes continue to maintain their contact with their participants one way or the other. And with the cafes now coming back, they're coming back resurgent with new energy. We've got around about 20 of them certainly have plans to return before Christmas. We've got 10 of them at the moment restarting to meet. But I'm thinking what marvellous connections can be made between the memory cafes locally, and I'm sure they have been over the years. The challenge is we've all been running them for so long now. You know, the Weybridge Memory Cafe, Helen, I think we're going to be 13 in, we're in our 13th year. So it could be that there might have been connections some years ago and they might have been lost. So it's a really great time, I think, for Kirsty and I to be encouraging memory cafes to reach out to their local museums, and if local museums could be reaching out to their memory cafes, I think that could be a most beautiful connection and a fantastic use of the collections throughout Cornwall. And if you would like to lend any works of art to the Weybridge Memory Cafe and Concern Weybridge, we can be entrusted by the National Gallery to look after one for a week. You can trust us.
Quite certain you've communicated that today, wholly trustworthy. And maybe that could be a follow-up action as well, Kirsty, is that perhaps in the email that I send with this recording to people who weren't able to make it and to people here today, we can include some contact details so we can see what happens next.
Yeah,
so thank you everybody for joining us. If we haven't got any follow-up points, I will include links, for example, to the brilliant work at Museum of Cornish Life, and to the film that has been made about their work with Susanna, so we can paint a bit more of a picture about what else has happened beforehand, and also links to Wheel Martin's marvellous memory cafe, which is already reunited under Gemma's care, with the brilliant volunteers there. And then if I investigate some sort of facilitation and training that we can look at. We can perhaps benefit a bit more from Tim's tremendous knowledge, and Dan, of course, at Memory Matters as well. But without further ado, I'll say goodbye to everybody, and thank you all so much for taking time to join us today. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Celine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. Cheers.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Celine.
No, thank you, Tim. That was brilliant. Really, really appreciate that. And it was a fantastic presentation that you gave us there. So I'm sure everyone will have taken loads from that. Really, really enjoy it.
Brilliant. So I look forward to